Central Africa. Good evening to our colleagues from Eastern and Southern Africa. And perhaps good morning to some of our partners who may be connecting from the US and Canada. We are excited to see you all connected to this regional press conference organized under the banner of the Cleanup Campaign, an initiative of CSO regional and global partners involved in tobacco control. These partners include the African Control Alliance, ATCA, the African Capacity Building Foundation, ACBF, the Africa Center for Tobacco Industry Monitoring and Policy Research, ATIM, the Center for Tobacco Control in Africa, CTCA, the Framework Convention Alliance, FCA, the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, CTFK, and the Global Center for Good Governance in Tobacco Control, GGTC. This year, focus on World No Tobacco Day is on the damages of tobacco to the environment, from its cultivation to its transformation. Tobacco pollutes the planet and damages human health. The World Health Organization states that 600 million trees are chopped down to make cigarettes. 84 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions are released into the air, raising, of course, global temperatures, and 22 billion tons of water used to make cigarettes. This is enormous. The harmful impact of the tobacco industry on the environment is vast and growing, adding unnecessary pressure to our planet's already scarce resources and fragile ecosystems. And of course, other than damaging the environment, we know that tobacco kills over 8 million people every year. It is a huge problem, which we as media professionals must contribute to solve by giving out adequate and reliable information. And that is why we have this press conference today. Let me just give some quick housekeeping rules. We would ask that you please stay muted until you have the floor. And I can also mention that this press conference is being recorded in English and in French, and we would share both recordings with you. Please feel free to use them as much as you can for your media productions. And finally, we have interpretation available in English and French. So please go to the interpretation icon and choose your language of preference. Let me now welcome the ATIM, the Africa Center for Tobacco Industry Monitoring and Policy Research. ATIM is represented here today by Lungile Nkosi. She's going to give us a welcome address. Over to you, Lungile.
Thank you, Caleb. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are joining us from. As Caleb has already mentioned, I am Lungile. I am representing the Africa Center for Tobacco Industry Monitoring and Policy Research. Prof. Ayo Yusuf would have loved to be part of this. Unfortunately, he could not make it as he had to travel this afternoon, but he did send his apologies. So before we get started, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to ATCA for organizing this and for making us, your partners, a part of this commemoration. I'd like to welcome everyone. I'd like to welcome all media personnel. I'd like to welcome, I see we have ACBF. I'd like to welcome ACBF and all other CEOs. Sorry, can you please mute your mic? Okay, sorry, I'll continue. So I just want to welcome each and every one of you to this special event. Caleb has already mentioned why we are here, but I will because I had also planned to say some of the things. I will just continue to say them anyway. So the purpose of this conference is to disseminate the regional press statement in commemoration of the World No Tobacco Day 2022. We are guided by the theme, Tobacco, a threat to our environment. This year, we aim to shed light on the environmental harms of tobacco. And each year on the 31st of May, we always have a theme, and this we celebrate it widely in the public health community. So this celebration provides an opportunity to inform the public about the risks associated with tobacco use, the practices of the tobacco industry, what individuals can do to claim their right to a healthy environment, and how we can protect the future generations. As Caleb mentioned, it is already well known that tobacco kills 8 million people each and every year. And on this World No Tobacco Day, we raise awareness mostly on the harms of tobacco on the environment, which in turn indirectly tends to harm humans as well. In recent years, there has been a growing concern about climate change. And when investigating the factors and/or industries that contribute to climate change, the tobacco industry was found to have a great impact on climate change because it contributes enormous amounts of greenhouse gases to the environment. And in that way, it harms the environment because throughout all its stages, throughout all the tobacco stages, so that's the manufacturing, the growing, cultivation, the use thereof also, it produces pollution. The tobacco industry therefore contributes to climate change. It reduces climate resilience. It wastes resources, as Caleb was saying, that they use a lot of water, and there's also deforestation. So it harms the environment in many ways, and it damages the ecosystems. This poses a challenge towards attaining some of the sustainable development goals. And I will not go into that, as it is part of what we are going to hear when they read the press statement. And with that being said, I'd like to welcome you all again, and I hope you do enjoy each and every minute of this conference. I will now ask Caleb to take the stage again. Thank you all and welcome.
Thank you very much, Lungile. Thank you very much to our team as well. Like you mentioned, one of the main reasons we have this press conference is to have the reading of our regional press statement. And we are going to do that right now. After that, we're going to have a question and answer session, and then we'll have closing remarks from the African Capacity Building Foundation. For the reading of the press statement, we are going to have it entirely in English and then entirely in French as well. So at this point, I think we would even need to have the interpreters just pause, because we're going to have the same press statement read in English and in French. So we're going to start off with the reading of the press statement in English. And for this, I'll call on Fatou Diop from the Framework Convention Alliance. Over to you, Fatou.
Thank you, Caleb. Hello, everyone. Or good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may find you. Before starting, just thank you to ATCA, thank you to all the partners. And to not waste any more time, I will be reading the press statement in English. World No Tobacco Day 2022 is yet another opportunity to shed light on the tobacco burden, commemorated under the theme Tobacco, Threat to Our Environment. This year's World No Tobacco Day offers an opportunity for all Africans to come together and claim their right to a healthy environment. Over 80% of the 1.3 billion tobacco users worldwide live in a low and middle income countries, where the burden of tobacco-related illness and death is the heaviest. This includes many African countries that unfortunately cannot cope with such a burden. As such, in addition to the challenge posed by tobacco use in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 3, health and well-being, tobacco is also threatening Africa's potentials to achieve SDG 14, life below water, and SDG 15, life on land, through its impact on the environment. World No Tobacco Day 2022 raises awareness about the environmental impacts of tobacco in relation to its cultivation, production, distribution, and post-consumption waste. Article 18 of the WHO Framework Convention of Tobacco Control requires parties to protect the environment and human health in respect of tobacco cultivation and transformation. Tobacco cultivation entails an intense quantity of fertilizers and pesticides compared to many other crops. These chemicals are eventually washed out of the tobacco fields and end up contaminating our waterways, including groundwater, rivers, and seas. Worse, exposure to these agrochemicals and pesticides can cause serious health problems and even death. Furthermore, the clearing of forests for development of new tobacco fields and curing contributes to deforestation, one of the main contributors of carbon dioxide emissions and climate change. About 11.4 million metric tons of wood are required annually for tobacco curing. In the 1970s and 1980s, 69 tobacco growing countries, mainly in Asia and Africa, experienced fuel wood shortages from tobacco production. This problem undoubtedly accelerated deforestation in those countries. By the mid-1990s, more than half of the 120 tobacco growing low and middle income countries were experiencing losses of 211,000 hectares of natural wooded areas annually, around 24 hectares per country. These represented about 5% of all national deforestation. This damage to the environment also incorporates the manufacturing of cigarettes and other tobacco products. These activities result in the release of greenhouse gases and other toxic waste pollution to the air. The emissions associated with the transportation of finished products also contribute to air pollution, further compounding the problem. These points bring to light the urgency in which governments must support alternative livelihoods to tobacco farming, especially in Africa, where farmers continue to dwell in poverty. Tobacco processing and transformation requires enormous quantities of water and generate a substantial amount of wastewater. The wastewater contains a range of toxins that negatively impact aquatic life. Moreover, plastics and chemicals used in cigarette filters eventually break down and leach into our water sources as millions of cigarettes are thrown away each year. In fact, cigarette butts are one of the most littered items on Earth. Also, 2/3 of every smoked cigarette are discarded onto the ground, and between 340 and 680 million kilograms of waste tobacco product is littered around the world each year. These end up on the streets in our water systems, making the tobacco burden to the environment even more complex. The manufacturing and the packaging of traditional tobacco products are highly resource intensive, and this is also true for emerging products like electronic nicotine delivery systems, which are electronic cigarettes. They are made up of disposable materials, including batteries, which, if not treated and disposed properly, can cause serious effects on our environment. Very aware of these damages it causes the environment, the tobacco industry has resorted to self-reporting selective data on the environmental harms, diverting the public's interest from the true impact of its production activities. The WHO FCTC has set a framework or guidelines that allows parties to adopt comprehensive policies and effective measures to require to fulfill their obligations on Articles 17 and 18. These include the establishment of innovative mechanisms for the development of sustainable alternative livelihoods for tobacco growers and workers, development programs connected with the promotion of food security and feasible markets that cover all aspects of the alternative to tobacco growing, including economic viability and the environmental protection. Consistent with Article 5.3 of the WHO FCTC and its guidelines, it is also important that the development and the implementation of policies and programs for promoting alternative livelihoods are protected from commercial and other vested interests of the tobacco industry. We must act now to ensure that our environment is not completely ruined by the tobacco production. Governments must ensure effective implementation of the provisions of Article 17 and 18 of the WHO FCTC and hold the tobacco industry accountable for its environmental damages. Governments must not fall for the corporate social responsibility initiatives undertaken by the tobacco industry as part of efforts to greenwash its image. The tobacco industry cannot be treated like any other type of industry because not only does it deprive human rights, including the right to good health and a clean environment, it has significant control over its products, design, and supply chains that unfortunately create an enormous burden to the environment. African governments must make the tobacco industry pay for this environmentally burden through adequate taxation. Government must also support viable alternatives to tobacco farming in order to limit the environment impact of the practice, and the tobacco industry must step away from attempts to shape government policy. Corporate social responsibility initiatives, which create an opportunity for the industry to divert attention from the true impact of its devastating action, must also be shunned. Africa deserves a clean and healthy environment, and we can together attain that milestone. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fatou, for giving us the press conference in English. We would now listen to the same press conference in French, and for that I'll call on my colleague, Kouma Massama, the Program Officer of the African Tobacco Control Alliance. Over to you, Kouma.
Thank you, Caleb. Bonjour, bonsoir à tous. Je vais procéder à la lecture du communiqué de presse en français. Nous devons faire payer l'industrie du tabac pour ses dommages environnementaux. La Journée mondiale sans tabac 2022 est une nouvelle occasion de faire la lumière sur le fardeau du tabac. Commémorée sous le thème « Le tabac, une menace pour notre environnement », la Journée mondiale sans tabac de cette année offre l'occasion à tous les Africains de se rassembler et de revendiquer leur droit à un environnement sain. Plus de 80% des 1,3 milliard de fumeurs dans le monde vivent dans les pays à revenus faibles ou intermédiaires. Et la charge des maladies et des décès liés au tabac est la plus lourde. Cela inclut de nombreux pays d'Afrique qui, malheureusement, ne peuvent pas faire face à un tel fardeau. Ainsi, outre le défi que représente le tabagisme pour la réalisation de l'objectif de développement durable 3, qui porte sur la santé et le bien-être, le tabac menace également le potentiel de l'Afrique à réaliser l'ODD 14, qui porte sur la vie sous l'eau, et l'ODD 15, qui porte sur la vie sur la terre, par ses impacts sur l'environnement. La Journée mondiale sans tabac sensibilise à l'impact environnemental du tabac en ce qui concerne sa culture, sa production, sa distribution et les déchets post-consommation. L'article 18 de la Convention cadre de l'OMS pour la lutte anti-tabac existe des parties qui protègent l'environnement et la santé humaine en ce qui concerne la culture, la consommation du tabac. La culture du tabac nécessite une quantité intense d'engrais et de pesticides par rapport à de nombreuses autres cultures. Ces produits chimiques sont finalement évacués des champs de tabac et finissent par contaminer nos cours d'eau, notamment les eaux souterraines, les rivières et les mers. Pire encore, l'exposition à ces produits agrochimiques et pesticides peut entraîner de graves problèmes de santé, voire la mort. En outre, le défrichage des forêts pour le développement de nouveaux champs de tabac et le séchage contribuent à la déforestation qui est l'un des principaux responsables des émissions de dioxyde de carbone CO2 et du changement climatique. Environ 11,4 millions de tonnes métriques de bois sont nécessaires chaque année pour le séchage du tabac. Dans les années 70 et 80, 69 pays producteurs de tabac, principalement en Asie et en Afrique, ont connu une pénurie de bois de chauffage due à la production de tabac. Ce problème a sans aucun doute accéléré la déforestation dans ces pays. Au milieu des années 90, plus de la moitié des 120 pays à revenus faibles ou intermédiaires producteurs de tabac subissaient des pertes annuelles de 211 hectares de zones boisées naturelles, soit environ 2124 hectares par pays. Cela représente environ 5% de la déforestation nationale totale. Ces dommages à l'environnement englobent également la fabrication de cigarettes et d'autres produits du tabac. Ces activités entraînent l'émission de gaz à effet de serre et d'autres déchets toxiques qui polluent l'air. Les émissions liées au transport des produits finis contribuent également à la pollution atmosphérique, ce qui aggrave encore le problème. Ces points mettent en lumière l'urgence pour les gouvernements de soutenir des moyens de substances alternatifs à la culture du tabac, notamment en Afrique où les agriculteurs continuent de vivre dans la pauvreté. Le traitement et la transformation du tabac nécessitent d'énormes quantités d'eau et génèrent une quantité importante d'eau usée. Ces eaux usées contiennent une série de toxines qui ont un impact négatif sur la vie aquatique. En outre, les plastiques et les produits chimiques utilisés dans les filtres à cigarettes finissent par se décomposer et s'infiltrer dans nos sources d'eau, car des millions de cigarettes sont jetées chaque année. En fait, les mégots de cigarettes sont l'un des articles les plus jetés sur Terre. Environ 2/3 de chaque cigarette fumée sont jetés sur le sol et entre 340 et 180 millions de kilogrammes de déchets de produits de tabac sont jetés dans le monde chaque année. Ceux-ci finissent dans les rues et les systèmes d'eau, ce qui rend encore plus complexe la charge du tabac sur l'environnement. La fabrication et le conditionnement des produits du tabac traditionnels sont très gourmands en ressources, ce qui est également vrai pour les produits émergents tels que les systèmes électroniques d'administration de nicotine, cigarettes électroniques. Ces produits sont constitués de matériaux jetables, notamment de piles, qui, s'ils ne sont pas traités et éliminés correctement, peuvent avoir de graves répercussions sur notre environnement. Très consciente des dommages qu'elle cause à l'environnement, l'industrie du tabac a eu recours à l'autodéclaration de données sélectives sur les nuisances environnementales, détournant ainsi l'intérêt du public du véritable impact de cette activité de production. La ATCA de l'OMS a établi un cadre ou des lignes directives qui permettent aux parties d'adopter des politiques globales et des mesures efficaces nécessaires pour remplir leurs obligations au titre des articles 17 et 18. Il s'agit notamment de la mise en place de mécanismes innovants pour le développement de moyens de substances alternatives durables pour les cultivateurs, les travailleurs du tabac, de programmes de développement liés à la promotion de la sécurité alimentaire et de marchés viables couvrant tous les aspects des alternatives à la prise du tabac, y compris la viabilité économique et la protection de l'environnement. Conformément à l'article 5.3 de la ATCA de l'OMS et à cette directive, il est également important que l'élaboration et la mise en œuvre de politiques et de programmes visant à promouvoir des moyens de substances alternatives soient protégés des intérêts commerciaux et autres de l'industrie du tabac. Nous devons agir maintenant pour que notre environnement ne soit pas complètement ruiné par la production du tabac. Les gouvernements doivent veiller à la mise en œuvre effective des dispositions des articles 17 et 18 de la ATCA de l'OMS et tenir l'industrie du tabac pour responsable de ces dommages environnementaux. Les gouvernements ne doivent pas se laisser prendre au piège des initiatives de responsabilité sociale des entreprises lancées par l'industrie du tabac dans le cadre des efforts pour redorer son image. L'industrie du tabac ne peut être traitée comme n'importe quel autre type d'industrie, car non seulement elle prive les gens de leurs droits, notamment le droit à la santé et à un environnement propre, mais elle exerce un contrôle important sur la conception de ces produits et sur les chaînes d'approvisionnement qui malheureusement créent un énorme fardeau pour l'environnement. Les gouvernements africains doivent faire payer l'industrie du tabac pour ce fardeau environnemental par une taxation adéquate. Les gouvernements doivent également soutenir des alternatives viables à la culture du tabac afin de limiter l'impact environnemental de ces pratiques, et l'industrie du tabac doit être tenue à l'écart des tentatives de façonner la politique gouvernementale. Les initiatives de responsabilité des entreprises qui donnent à l'industrie l'occasion de détourner du véritable impact dévastateur doivent également être évitées. L'Afrique mérite un environnement propre et sain et nous pouvons ensemble atteindre cette étape. Merci. Merci, Caleb.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kouma Masama. Just to note, dear colleague, that Geoffrey read the press statement in English, is the regional coordinator of the Framework Convention Alliance, FCA. She's the regional coordinator for Africa. And Kouma Masama is the project officer of the African Tobacco Control Alliance, ATCA. Thank you very much. We would now go on to get a series of questions from the panel, and we have some of our regional partners here with us at the African Capacity Building Foundation, and we have for a few minutes FCA as well. We also have a team who are here represented. I'm sure we'll be able to provide responses to some of the questions you may have, you the media professionals. If there are any, please feel free to raise your hand and we would give you the floor. Otherwise, you can also use the chat box to ask your questions. Anybody with a question? Any media professional has a question to ask? Okay. The first question is coming from Defo. Defo Fiage. Ask your question. You can turn on your camera if you wish, since this has been recorded. If that's fine, please turn on your camera. If not, you can go ahead.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Caleb. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Now, my interest, well, really here in Botswana, because we don't plant tobacco. My main interest would be with regards to this cigarette butts. I would love to understand the impact of that with regards to this year's theme. And I also would love to understand or know what governments can do to make sure that cigarette butts are not being thrown everywhere, where they can be even accessed by children and even go or even pollute the environment. What can governments really do with regards to that problem? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand that we have some interpretation problems right now. Please just give us a moment to sort this out. We're working to sort it out. Okay. Yes, it's good for the French channel. Okay, thank you very much for that question, Defo. Personally, I could say something, or maybe I should leave the others. We have Fatu here, and we have other partners who can say something before we can come in.
Sure, I can go ahead and say something, and if anyone else wants to sort of just add on to what I say. Thank you for your question. I think it's a very good question. I mean, in the press statement, one of the facts that was stated is that cigarette butts are one of the most littered items on earth. So I think that there is a lot to be done in order to sort of fight this, or in order to sort of combat this, and to ensure that this is not affecting our climate, our environment, and do more. I think that we can say that government can sort of, ensure that they create smoke-free environments. I think that's very helpful, like Article 8 of the WHO guidelines suggests, to make sure that in certain areas, in certain places, that people aren't allowed to smoke. This also answers your question about how to ensure that children are not also affected by this, by ensuring that maybe restaurants or workplaces or schools, that people aren't allowed, teachers, whether it's teachers or any administration, aren't allowed to smoke in schools. There's also other guidelines that can, and measures that can be put in place, such as not being able to sell cigarettes at like a couple of meters from schools. For example, in Senegal, it's 200 meters from schools, to make sure that, they aren't able to influence children, and to make sure that they aren't allowed to sell cigarettes within close contact to any schools within that area. I also believe that, there's a need to sort of engage and partner with any associations working on climate change, working on the environment, to sort of ensure that places, free and open places that people go to, are able to ensure that there is a way to not have cigarettes being littered. I think there are a couple of ways, and I think this was brilliantly written by the different guidelines, ways to protect our environments. And I just, cited a couple, but ways to protect the environments and the children. So I think that will be my answer. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in on that. I mean, we also have, neutral cigarette packs or cigarette packs with graphic health warnings to ensure that, and to make sure that kids are aware of the dangers of smoking cigarettes. So again, I'm just citing a couple, but I don't know if anyone wants to just add on to that answer of mine. But thank you for the question. I think it was a great question.
Thank you very much, Fatou. I think that question has been very adequately answered. I don't know if Lungile or the ACDF representative, that's Bettina, wants to say something.
Okay, maybe I can just say, the basic thing that we all need to do is to try and make sure that our smoking laws are enforced, because once we enforce all our FCTC guidelines and make sure that everything is implementation and enforcement, we will be able to reduce tobacco use. And in that way, we will be able to reduce even the cigarette butts, all that pollution. So I think the one thing that I would say, in addition to what Fatou has already said, is that we just need to make sure that we push for law enforcement and implementation across Africa. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lungile. The next question, we have Mr. Bagnik Geoffrey from Senegal. Yes, raised his hand. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Voilà, merci. Je voudrais vraiment remercier.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank all the organizers of this press conference. My question is on the harmonization of legislation across Africa, because there are some neighboring countries to Senegal, and still they don't have a good legislation of tobacco control. Today, don't you think that we need to move at the ECOWAS level for the harmonization of legislation, but also on tobacco taxation? Because we realize that if tobacco is cheap in a country, there are risks of smuggling of tobacco products. So what is the policy that we need to put in place to harmonize the legislation across our region, and also tobacco taxation? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baknik. that there are some measures being taken, especially for the West African regional bloc to harmonize certain aspects of tobacco control legislation, especially with regards to taxation. But maybe I should leave the panelists, the other organizations represented here to maybe give an answer to that question.
I guess I'll go. And if anyone else wants to chime in. I mean, he raised a very good question. I think a lot of West African countries have this issue. A lot of the ECOWAS countries have this issue. And as Caleb already stated, there are different organizations sort of working through this issue to ensure that there's some kind of harmonizations between these different countries. Of course, it makes it really hard when, let's say, one country has strong laws and strong guidelines and is sort of trying to fight this, and another country sort of has maybe not so strong laws, and that there's smuggling and being happening between these different countries to sort of ensure that these laws are being respected. I think that in regards to maybe like the smuggling, what we can say is that, you know, there is, for example, the push of making sure that countries have a tracking and a tracing system. I think that's the best way to fight it, right? With a tracking and a tracing system, it lets you know whatever cigarette products are being, you know, driven into a country, where they're coming from, where they've, you know, where they sort of traveled country to country until it reached that country, to ensure that there's no smuggling of any illicit products, and to ensure that the products that the tobacco industry are pushing out there are following certain guidelines. Taxation is also a big way to sort of fight this. And as you stated, within these ECOWAS country, it's sort of hard to have a harmonization, but it is being worked on. It is being worked on. And what we're hoping for is that once we're able to sort of have a harmonization, this makes it easier on anything that has to do with taxation, with also products being pushed from different countries to others, because as you see, even for Senegal, they have a tobacco factory that sort of, which is Philip Morris, which go ahead and sells to different countries which don't have factories, right? So this is where it is important to ensure that certain laws are being pushed, are being harmonized, to ensure that there is a system in place, like the tracking and tracing system, and to make sure that parties that are part of either that have ratified, whether it's the COP or the MOP, are, you know, they know that they're required to sort of apply these guidelines and ensure to help push the government to follow these different guidelines, you know. And I think our colleague from a team spoke about it, is to make sure that it is being implemented and that there's we follow up on government and we push them to ensure that they're able to implement these different guidelines.
Okay, thank you very much, Fatou. I can add on to that just to say that the very fact that you raise this point, Mr. Bagni, is already an effort you as a media professional can also contribute to bringing that change. And you know, you have the power to inculcate this ideology within our states. If you talk about it, you start talking about it, the need to have a harmonized measures, tobacco control measures, together that build already some sort of it already mobilizes ideas or mobilizes support for this idea, and that is also a very brilliant way we can achieve this very, very important aspect of tobacco control. We have another question from Cameroon, from Ebenizer DIKI. He says, bonjour à tous. J'aimerais savoir lorsque le gouvernement
Good morning, everyone. When the governments are hesitating to take drastic measures, what can be the role of the media on the continent? Because some governments explain their attitudes that they say that the tobacco industry is creating jobs.
Zadiki from Cameroon. Lungile, you want to say something about that, or Fatou?
I may.
The question is about the tobacco industry's arguments of creating employment, and that leads the industry to that leads governments to not want to take drastic measures against the industry because the industry claims it is creating employment.
Okay, I can give it a try. So, for example, the tobacco industry, I'll give an example in South Africa. They say they do create jobs and they are very important, to the GDP. They bring a lot of money. But when we really look at research, and what researchers have found is that they actually cause more illnesses than the money that we bring in through job creation. So in South Africa, tobacco contributes to about 42 billion rands in terms of health costs. So all that money, whereas they bring in about 12 billion, not so 100% sure about my numbers, but there's just a big difference in terms of what they bring in and what they cost the economy. So their jobs also in countries like Malawi, they have mentioned that, researchers have found that instead of providing jobs, people end up being even more poorer. I think even in the statement, it was mentioned in the press statement that that instead of uplifting people, we make them even more poorer because they come up with contracts. Their contracts will still bind people in terms of people would still have to go and sell to the industry, yet the industry will give them prices sell. So in terms of just job creation, it's not an argument that it's not a strong argument. We can always counter that argument. I think someone can maybe add on to what I have said. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Lungile. We have a reaction to this question also by Mr. Leon Satur, the Executive Secretary of ATCA. In French, il dit bonjour, Ebenezer, la réaction du gouvernement n'est pas vraiment une incitation.
Good morning, Ebenezer. The government reaction is not an incentive. 44 countries ratify the FCTC, but their attitude is due to the interference of tobacco industry in the process of adoption and also implementation of policies, tobacco control policies. So the media should continue creating awareness to the political leaders and the general populace, given the fact that we are facing an epidemic, which is a threat to our health, our environment, our economy, and also our development.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leon Satur. We should take about 2 or 3 more questions very quickly. We have Nadesh Christel Boa from Cameroon. Please ask your question very quickly and we can proceed.
Okay. Bonjour à tous. Merci.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for such an initiative to the media. My question is about harmonization because I'm sorry for the noise. I am in a noisy environment. I was saying that my question is regarding, I want us as international organization, can you tell us where do we stand what is the contribution for the reduction of the impact of tobacco on the people? What is the level of the impact globally? Because we talk about countries that are really pulling some others down, but some countries are making progress. Globally speaking, how to be the grade? What is the grade you can give to Africa, taking into account the problems that we raised earlier? Thank you so much.
I think that to note African countries, like you're saying, would not be an appropriate way of appreciating the efforts that the tobacco control advocates and stakeholders are undertaking in Africa. There is enormous work being done in the continent. Civil society is doing phenomenal work. Governments are increasingly being sensitized on the need to protect the population from tobacco and tobacco use. But like we've just stated, the tobacco industry is very, very powerful and very influential and can really, really destabilize lots of efforts we do. And that's why we must remain firm. We must remain committed in our efforts to keep our populations protected. And I can just tell you that a lot is being done, but if we really want to say that we want to note African countries on how they are doing, it may not be the best way to go about it. However, I can also mention the Africa Tobacco Industry Interference Index, which was undertaken by ATCA and other regional and global partners. That gives us a brief classification of some 14 countries in Africa and how their governments were able to, it gives us a rating of how these countries, 14 African countries, were able to, or are able to deal with tobacco industry interference, or how their efforts to push back tobacco industry interference in the continent. That report is available, and we can make it available to you if it is going to help you in any way. I don't know if anyone else wants to propose an answer to that quickly before we get to Geoffrey, who is probably going to give us the last question.
Just really quickly, I just wanted to sort of just add a little bit to what Caleb said. I think to sort of also judge Africa as a whole would be quite unfair, seeing that Africa is a continent with so many different countries and even different languages and nuances and different governments. I think one of the great things about the FCTC also, and the countries that have ratified, is that these parties get together often, every 2 years, right, to sort of discuss these different guidelines that have been put in place and how best to sort of help the continent and how best to move along certain articles and to vote for them and to create these laws and to enforce them. And I think that we've come a long way. And I think also that we must keep in mind that Africa is a young continent, with a lot of young people. And this is something that the tobacco industry plays on, right? They know that in the other continents, maybe they are losing a stepping ground. But in Africa, seeing that there's so many young people, they make sure to come and they make sure to target these young folks. And as Caleb said, they are very powerful and have the monetary means to sort of corrupt and to sort of try to influence governments. But there are guidelines in place, just such as Article 5.3. So it is our role, which was stated, I think, sometime during this press conference, as tobacco control advocates, as a civil society, as the press, to ensure that we all play adequately our role in protecting, whether it's the environment, our country's children, people's health, and to make sure that the right information is being disseminated out there.
Thank you very much, Fatou. Geoffrey, please, very quickly, your question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I wanted to contribute on the issue that tobacco industry creates employment. I beg for us to look at it from this angle when they come from that submission. The effect of this tobacco production on their own staff, I mean, those who work in the tobacco industry, is something to tell them that, look, people who consume tobacco, it affects labor. People who are actually having tobacco-related diseases, their output decreases, and it affects both the tobacco industry and any other industry out there. It also, these people that it affects are sometimes the breadwinners of very, very little families that are very poor people, middle-income countries and poor countries like Africa, where most of them are located, are not able to survive when these domestic breadwinners fall out. So these are the negative implications. When you go to the national level, it increases the health budget of these countries. The countries are already struggling, and then you have to use a lot of money. Most of these diseases are not even curable, you know? So you are actually going to be managing them with huge amounts of money. So it increases the health budget of these countries, further making them poor. And then when they come to the issue of the fact that it creates employment, now hit it back to them that they actually have the opportunity to use the same lands that they are tilling to produce tobacco, to produce other agri-products like cocoa, like timber, like, I mean, any other food stuff. They can produce these agri-products with the same lands, with the same labor. And then when it comes to the factory level, they can produce edible fruits and any other thing at the end of the day that we can consume and not be sick. So the truth is, it is easy. Around Corona, when the coronavirus came, I mean, we saw some of these alcoholic industries. They started producing hand sanitizers, telling you that these people were capable of producing very usable and important products. But the truth is, they preferred to produce some of these dangerous products. And so how hard our government gets on them and how we all maximize our effort to stop them doesn't mean that they are going to fall out of business. No, it's a deliberate attempt to hit where the negatives are. Mind you, they are creating health consequences that some of these pharmaceutical companies are interested in. It's a whole ball game. It doesn't end with the tobacco industry. They are playing the game into the hands of this big pharma who are already sitting down with their medicines to manage these people. So it's not, we are not fighting only one group. We are fighting the tobacco industry. We are also fighting a big pharma, a pharmaceutical hub of very wealthy people who are ready to produce pharmaceuticals to manage these sicknesses. So it's a deliberate attempt to further impoverish us, get us sick, and then also create the medicines. So I think we should look at it from that angle and not look at it from only the angle of the creating employment. No. They're creating employment, and the employment they are creating is not significant. Even the inflows, how many people do they employ? Factory hands, how much are these people earning? When you do a cross basic one in those countries where they are in Africa, where they are even producing, the people they have employed are not earning much. Yet these people are at risk of even consuming, and their family members are at risk of also consuming. When that person falls out, the child, the wife, the other relatives, and even the society at large. Mind you, politicians are also falling victims of these products. And so we are losing leaders, we are losing very significant people in society because of tobacco consumption. And we should look at it from that angle. My humble presentation.
Thank you. Very, very passionate about this, Geoffrey. Thank you very much for your contribution. I'd like to very quickly bring this question that was asked by Esther. It has already been responded to, but because we are doing a live program here, I just want to voice it out so that we don't miss it out, during this recording. So Esther from Nigeria, she says, good afternoon. Knowing the dangers of carbon emissions to our planet, knowing the dangers of carbon emissions to our planet, is a smoke-free environment really possible following the lackadaisical approach of some states or countries to tobacco control? And like I said, this question was already responded to by ATCA's executive secretary. He says, I think a smoke-free environment is possible. It will start from the households at community level and state level. We need to invest in education and enforcement of the policies. The tobacco-free generation is possible. The media will be of great help. So, thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have addressed all the questions that came in. We have also noted very well your comment, Madam Lutgard. Thank you very much for this. We would end this press conference with some closing remarks. And to do that, we have Madam Bettina Etiwa from the African Capacity Building Foundation, ACBF. Bettina, please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Caleb. As we come to the end of our 2022 World No Tobacco Day commemoration with the theme Tobacco, a Threat to Our Environment, we have heard today during this press conference the risks and the harms that are associated with the tobacco use to our environment and to the humanity. And we have also heard about the effects, the negative effects of deforestation. We have also heard about the effects of the air pollution and the ground and water pollution. We have also discussed the harmonization of policies in Africa with respect to taxation. We have also discussed the cost benefit of tobacco production and use, and realized that more costs than benefits are associated with tobacco use. Our call to action today is for the governments to encourage alternative livelihoods through supportive policies and regulations guided by the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. We have also realized the need to act now and ensure that our environments are not ruined by tobacco production. In addition, our call to action also is to make the tobacco industry accountable for its actions and avoid this greenwashing. We therefore take this opportunity to thank ATCA, the African Tobacco Control Alliance, for leading the organization of this World No Tobacco Day commemoration through this press conference. We also want to thank the other partners that have worked with ATCA for the success of this, that is the Africa Center for Tobacco Industry Monitoring and Policy Research, ATIM, the African Capacity Building Foundation, the ACBF, the Center for Tobacco Control in Africa, CTCA, the Framework Convention Alliance, FCA, the Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids, CTFK, the Global Center for Good Governance in Tobacco Control, GGTC. Thank you all partners for putting this together. I think you can agree with me that since Friday, we've been talking about this theme of the year 2022 on World No Tobacco Day. We also want to thank our interpreters and moderators and the speakers from FCA and ATCA. Thank you very much. We are very grateful to you all, our media participants, and the organization representatives that are here today with us during this press conference. We thank you for attending this press conference and making it a success. Together, we can work for clean and healthy environments. Thank you. Goodbye. Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
But how what a way to end the press conference. Thank you very much, Bettina. We can just say happy World No Tobacco Day to you all, and let us together work to ensure that we make a tobacco-free world, a tobacco-free Africa possible. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.